Welcome to Cape Connect, another show about drug addiction. And this time we're going to be talking about youth, and we're very fortunate to have as guest Sheila House, who's the youth counselor at Harwich. Mm-hmm. The town of Harwich has, quite a few youth, as the other 14 towns on the Cape do, and they get into trouble sometime. And there are many stories that we can tell, but we're going to try and focus, on the addiction problem. What do you do when there's a little girl who's, we're talking anywhere from 11 years old to 18 years old? What do you do when there's a little girl who is having nervous problems or difficulty, happens to smoke some marijuana, feels better? Hey, well, that was good. What do you say? How can you help the parents and the family in that kind of situation? Sheila, we got a lot to talk about. Mm-hmm. Where should we start?
Well, part of the reason that the town of Harwich hired or created my position was to help with kids that are at risk, but also prevention efforts. Mm. So I'm finding more and more that my caseload has middle school kids. And so we're doing a lot in that area, not only in the schools, but just in the one-on-one counseling or the family counseling that I do.
And middle-aged school goes from what grade to
it's
which grade?
It's 5th, 6th, and 7th grades.
6th and 7th, that's right. It's an 8th to all the way through high school.
Yeah.
And they're Monomoy Regional High School,
yes.
Chatham and Harwich together now.
Yes, yep, yes. Yeah. So typically the kids that I see, if they are starting to use pot, it's for the reason that you're talking about. A lot of it is that they're anxious, some of it's just social, some of it's stress relief. They have a whole lot of reasons, but because of the impending legalization and also because of medical marijuana, it's become more socially acceptable and kids are less afraid of it than they were, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
And parents may have done it as
yes.
Kids themselves.
Sometimes.
And think, hey, what are you worried about? Though
right.
I understand that the marijuana is now about 10 to
23 times.
Much
10
more
to 23.
potent than it was
yes.
back in
yes.
your youth.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's also a lot more chemicals and other things in it that it can be treated with. The other thing that wasn't happening 20 years ago is there weren't studies coming out about teenage brains and what drugs and alcohol do to them, and that information is now coming out all over the country, actually worldwide. So there's definite evidence that it affects levels of IQ, of learning, of brain development, a lot of things that are going on like that. So
it does have a bit of an influence, and though one says, oh, it won't hurt you, maybe we better be a little more careful because there is some evidence of some difficulty. I brought along the teenage brain. I got it out of the library mm-hmm. in anticipation of our talking about youth.
Yep. And
it's a neuroscientist's survival guide for parents in raising adolescents and young adults. Mm-hmm. Because, in fact, this is a MD academic researcher
yep.
Talking about the fact that this is a different brain that these young kids have.
Yeah.
It's still developing. Not only is it developing physically, mm-hmm. the connections are also
yes.
changing. And what we use in parts of our brain, they're using other parts of their brain, and it's different.
Right.
Just
right.
different.
Well, there's areas of the brain that are working very well and areas of the brain that aren't. So when you have somebody, they get to be about 12, 13 years old, the frontal lobes aren't fully engaged.
Yeah.
And we all know that's the area, well, not everybody knows, but that's the area of the brain where it's rational, logical thought. So that area of the brain will be fully activated when you're crossing the street and you look both ways. When you think, well, I better study for a test because if I don't, I won't get a good grade. I better brush my teeth or I'll get cavities. So that's that's really what, it's not emotional. And in teenagers, because they've been able to do these brain scans now to see what areas of the brain are lit up, in teenagers that area is not too lit up. However,
the judgment of what's going to happen in the future.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's just a developmental thing. It doesn't fill in fully until they're 24 years old, 25 years old, which is why the drinking age is 21.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the limbic system, which is in the midbrain, which is where all the emotions are and the impulsivity and it's the pleasure center, that thing is having a party, you know, at this age, and just fully active, and that's why somebody that's 15 would watch the movie Jackass. I don't know if you've heard of that movie. But
I have not.
Well, it's teenagers doing all sorts of crazy, risky behavior, and so they'll see a kid in the show Jackass or the movie Jackass jumping off a 2-story building, and that's a perfectly fun thing to try because they don't have a sense of their mortality. So that's why it's easier for them to make choices, not very healthy choices around what they're going to put in their bodies.
And yet, the strange thing is, at this time in their development, they're able to learn things very rapidly.
Yeah.
I mean, on the computer, you know, they're just taking in information at a tremendous rate. And therefore, it makes people think, well, if they can do that, why can't they be sensible about some of these other things?
Right. I think a lot of parents I've talked to, one parent in particular said this great thing, they look like little adults. You know, they look like sort of small, not quite formed adults, so it's easy to assume that they are making the right decisions, but really in reality the parents are acting as their frontal lobes. They kind of have to. So.
And you counsel with parents as well. How does that work out?
Well, I do. It's really parent coaching.
Yes.
And you know, these parents know their kids way better than I do. Obviously, they spend all this time with them. But it's nice for them to talk to somebody that they're not related to, you know, and somebody that isn't a friend, you know, somebody that just has listened to parents talking about their kids for 20, 25 years, and what works for some parents, what doesn't work for others, you know. So it's almost like they have somebody that has their back as far as would this be a good thing to do? Would this be a good thing to try? And, you know, we sort of experiment and figure out what's not working and try different things as far as how they set rules or communicate or whatever it is, you know. They're really the experts, you know. They just need to hear that. You know what I mean?
You need to convince them of that.
Absolutely, you know, because the kids will say, you're the only parent in the world that is this strict, or you're the only one that won't let me do this. Everybody else's parents, you know, and that's not true, of course.
Well, maybe I should, in fact, really say that this book, The Teenage Brain by Frances E. Jensen, she's a mother, and she had 2 kids growing up, and so at the end of each chapter, she's giving advice to people. Hang in there. Don't let things happen.
Right.
Be sure that there's, in a sense, good education, by which she means, you know, if a tragedy occurs in the town, talk to your kids about it. Let them understand what started that and how it developed.
Yeah.
And does that play out in Harwich, as you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And Harwich isn't any different than any other town on the Cape. I mean,
yeah, but we all have this
kids
terrible drug addiction
I
that's
know,
going on.
I know.
And is what's happening to these very young kids leading to other kinds of drugs, opiates, heroin eventually?
It can because it just, you don't know. I remember Chris Herron, who is a former NBA basketball player for the Celtics, goes and gives great talks around the nation to kids about, because he became a heroin addict. And he said that nobody, when they're 8 or 9 or 10 years old, says, I want to grow up and take heroin. I mean, nobody does. And even people in high school don't say that.
But it happens.
The problem is that you don't know if your brain is going to be the brain that likes that feeling and likes it so much that they want to keep using it, keep trying other things. When you smoke pot and you drink, your inhibitions get lowered, and therefore it's a lot easier to say, oh, maybe I'll try that. If you're out with people or at a party or something, maybe I'll try this, you know, and you don't know if when you take it, first of all, whether it's going to kill you or not,
Yes.
because that can happen.
It does.
Second
It
of all,
does.
whether you're going to be the person who goes, ugh, that's awful, I'll never do that again, or wow, that was amazing, I want more.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that. So it's like Russian roulette is what
So
you're
you
doing.
don't want to take the first drink. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you want to put it off
You
as
don't
long
want the
as
first
possible.
injection. You don't want to take the first sniff. You
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
take that first risk.
And because smoking pot and drinking has become so much more normalized in the past 20 years, I think people don't realize how dangerous it can be. You know, drinking is still the number one cause of accidents and things like that with kids. So
Yeah, well, maybe we should highlight that again, because you know, the county health has just come out with the human costs.
yeah,
14% of Cape residents live with chronic condition of substance use disorder.
mm-hmm.
And what is substance use? Well, primarily it's alcohol.
yeah,
And
yeah,
more people are dying from that abuse on the Cape
yeah.
than are dying from the opiates.
Right. Opiates is pretty close, but alcohol is still
And they're
number one.
skyrocketing
Yeah,
up now.
yeah. But because alcohol is legal, I think, you know, people don't pay attention to it as much. So, but opioids often starts out as legal as well. You know, so it's a prescription. You know, not unusual for kids getting their wisdom teeth out to have somebody give them a prescription for 30 Vicodin. What do they need 30 Vicodin for? They just don't need that many pills, you know.
What do they do with the pills that they don't need?
Well, they sit around and they're in medicine cabinets, and then other people might find out they're in medicine cabinets. Or, again, if you are the person whose body loves that feeling that the opioid gives you, you're going to want to take it recreationally. So
and then what if you take it recreationally? How does that scenario play out?
Well, the way it plays out is that your body needs more and more and more of it. So then you can't get it through a prescription source, and you start paying exorbitant amounts to get the pills, you know.
How?
Just from people that are dealing them on the street. And then that becomes too expensive, because very often Percocets, for instance, can go for anywhere from $30 to $60 per pill. And this is why people often make the leap that they never thought they'd make to heroin, because it's cheaper. It's less expensive, and it provides the same feeling, obviously. So it's not you know, I've heard so many addicts say, I will never ever do heroin ever in my life, you know, and then it happens because of their body needing it so badly.
They can't fight it by themselves, certainly.
Yeah.
The other information that comes is in terms of the financial costs, and and they're stupendous, and also, when you look at what's being paid for, you're doing law enforcement as the primary thing, because in fact you've got to get the drug not so available. You've got to get the people that are stealing in order to have money for the drugs to stop doing that. Incarceration.
Yep. And treatment.
And treatment is the other big thing, the treating. But are they treating accurately? Are they treating it in a focused way so that it won't be just stopping it, but there's a long-range plan? So
Gosnold has a program that came into place recently where they have recovery coaches, and it's really, really been amazing. It's been a very well-received program and quite successful. So they're focusing more efforts on that.
What ages primarily? Down to the 18-year-olds?
I think so. Yeah. And I think it's anybody that's coming out of recovery. And but still, 95% of the money that's spent, as you were saying, over 95% is on treatment and recovery and the legal system, and 5% less is on what they call harms reduction
Yes, what is that? I saw that, harms reduction.
Harms reduction are needle programs, and the programs that the police have now started where you can just walk in and dump all your medications into this chute and no questions asked, and they just destroy the medication, so that you're not having all these addictive medications sitting in your home or medicine cabinet. And then the other piece besides harms reduction is prevention. You know, it's 1% or less spent on prevention. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't treat people. Of course we should treat people, but I'm just saying that something has to move in the direction of prevention more, in my mind, so that kids don't have to end up, you know, on the other end of it.
There was a story told at one of the meetings about drug addiction, in which it was in a hair salon, and the various women, have you heard that one?
Mm-mm.
Various women were there, and suddenly one person got a terrible cramp. This one lady got a terrible cramp, and I can barely stand it. Mm-hmm. And 3 other women in the hair salon said, well, I have a pill I can give you. They had a pain pill. They had an opiate there that was left over from a previous time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you someone that I've dealt with recently had an Achilles tendon problem, and he says, I didn't take them all, and it's nice. I've got them in case I have another trouble coming up, and they're available.
Yeah.
Well, it's very much like, you know, he's got kids.
Right.
And if you had a gun, you'd want to be sure that you locked the gun up so the kids couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Are those pills similarly inaccessible for the kids?
Yeah, there's lock boxes you can buy too for, you know, for that purpose. But what you just said is that's how a lot of people get addicted in the first place. I had a young lady tell me that she was cleaning houses as a job, you know, when she was getting out of high school, and that one of her best clients gave her as a bonus some OxyContin. Oh. You know, and on top of whatever he paid her, and it was like,
well-intentioned. It
was well-intentioned, but because she had back pain, but she became instantly addicted to it because it's so addictive. Of the 3, it's the most addictive, OxyContin. So, but anyway, so people get it from other people that way, and you should never give anybody any kind of medication.
Of course not.
Without checking, because nobody knows what kind of reaction somebody's going to have to it.
And there's generally a physician that's involved that
Exactly.
would already know ahead of time if you were to start on some kind of medication. You need that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are the facilities available on the Cape, at this end of the Cape, for the middle of the Cape, anywhere on the Cape, really that people can afford for treatment of teens that are in trouble?
Well, unfortunately, most of the beds for teens that are in trouble if they have to go inpatient are off Cape. There's nothing on Cape for kids. But
I didn't know that.
There's psychiatric services, but not for
Where do they go?
They go. So there's some facilities in southeastern Massachusetts. I believe McLean Hospital might have some, but you know,
off Cape.
Yeah, off Cape. Yeah. Which is hard for the families because, you know, ideally, if you're going to have a kid inpatient, you want to be able to visit them all the time and stuff like that. So it's harder when it's off Cape. They're working, you know, can be really challenging. But you know, there's a lot of good substance abuse outpatient counselors on the Cape through not only Gosnell, but a lot of the agencies have people that have certification.
Do they let teens into a program where they're using the different kinds of artificial opiates that can sort of carry them through, methadone and...
I don't think if they're under 18, no.
That's not...
I don't have any kids in my caseload who are addicted to opiates right now, so it's mostly alcohol and marijuana. But it's certainly something that Gosnold, I know, is looking into.
Yeah, and they don't allow any of these methadones and other things. You do need counseling as you're getting something keep you going, it's one of the options.
Yeah, I've had kids in my caseload that are, I don't see just teenagers, through adults, very often parents are the ones that are struggling. So besides parent coaching, I also do therapy with parents, grandparents.
Oh.
And I've had kids that have come back to see me that are in recovery, and they're using the clinics for Suboxone or
Suboxone is something that most people don't know about,
Yeah.
I think, and that's something that should get out. Not that we're urging people to take that option,
Yeah.
but it's an option, and
To
people
wean
don't
people off.
realize it.
Yeah. So
And certainly Gosnell won't touch it.
yeah, well, the clinics that use it, they want the young person to be connected with a therapist. So very
course.
often, yeah. So if they live in
course.
Harwich, they can see me, and so they have that double support.
I see.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. And you find other things with respect to kids that, purple flags aimed at awareness.
Yes.
They're going to continue to have these kinds of remembrances of people that have died because they overdosed, and there wasn't a chance for the police or other people or someone in the family to get some Narcan to that person before they were gone.
Yeah, yeah. And the police now in most towns on the Cape can now distribute that, which is wonderful because they're very often the first ones that show up at the house. So that's really good.
I told you I brought in the Cape Cod Times for today. Well, there isn't any article, though there frequently is, about drugs, but the editorial in today's paper, they're looking at many who work on behalf of drug prevention and treatment efforts on the Cape know that the challenges are substantial. You bet. What most of us would also acknowledge is that the well-intentioned and considerable endeavors to curb the epidemic have thus far failed to produce any substantial fruit. And that's a pretty strong statement, a little overstated, but I'm afraid closer to the truth than we'd like it to. But then they get to, what has changed? And what has changed is the people that they now designate as, there are those who would argue that becoming a drug addict is an individual choice, and that society has no real obligation to bail those people out. This pull yourself up by your bootstraps approach carries a lot of weight in a capitalistic society where success is often acquainted exclusively to sheer effort.
Yeah.
That's still around, isn't it?
Yeah, I wish that people didn't, believe that only. There are a lot of people that's what
But
they
you run
suppose.
into that in your practice.
Sure, yeah. I mean, being determined and all that stuff will help you in recovery, but it's so many other things have to be in play. And a guy did a fascinating study recently where he studied rats and got them addicted to drugs, and the experiment involved the rats going to these two things. One had the addictive drug on it, and one didn't. And in an environment where there were no other rats around, no other animals, they kept going back to the substance that was addictive. But when they put them in this big, huge space with like lots of other rat friends and things that they could play with and stuff that stimulated them, they didn't go for the addictive substance anymore. So it said something about how the whole social component is so important in people's recovery. And I believe that. Trying to do it alone and all by yourself and, ooh, I'm so independent, I think that's just a myth. I mean, you need a lot of people to help you. Yeah. And also, we have to build awareness about this. That's how this is going to change. And the Barnstable County Substance Abuse Coalition and the Cape and Islands, Massachusetts Opioid Prevention Council, I said all those right, they're raising money through grants so that we can start really hitting this head on. So it is happening.
And the schools are...
Yep.
How about our regional school, Monomoy?
Yep. They're, Bill Burkhead, the principal there, is very committed to doing this, as is Scott Carpenter, the superintendent. So
how does it work in the county? I mean, you began to say, there are these organizations, but
Well, they just got 2 grants awarded, one to educate people about the opioid problem and, you know, what can be put into place policy-wise for that. And the second was for an underage substance abuse prevention specialist.
tell me more about that.
Well, this would be
how
somebody
would that work?
It would be somebody that would be involved in towns on the Cape. I think there's 8 participating towns that applied to be part of this, including Harwich.
Oh.
And it would be somebody that would work on the prevention piece as far as going into schools and being available in the community. So,
Yeah. Well, it's very different, I think, from having that motivational person come in.
and just a one-shot thing.
And it was a
Yeah,
one-shot
yeah,
thing, and
yeah.
but he's paid a fair bit of money, and they
Yeah.
say, oh, he was so expensive, we can't have him come back
Right.
for a while. And yet, on the other hand, they're trying to do prevention.
Yeah,
They're trying to
yeah.
do education.
I know there has to be something piggybacked onto that kind of initiative. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
a follow-up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How do they follow it up? They have discussion groups?
Well, they were going to start a Project Purple after
Yeah.
Chris Heron came, and that's still in the
Yes,
works, which
yes.
is a group of kids that
Yeah.
are committed to not
Yeah.
using. So, anyway, that'll happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Well, there's so many things that, you know, we still haven't gotten there. Yeah, I mean, nationwide, they talk about having a march to the White House.
yeah, yeah.
And that's in October.
Yep, there was one in the spring too.
Yeah,
I guess
and-
it was exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so that's how many movements get going, to let everybody know that there's not only a following, there's a need.
yeah, yeah.
And it's a need that involves legislation still, involves cooperation between different kinds of organizations, certainly on the Cape, but different federal organizations that
Right.
aren't together. Mental health isn't fully together with the drug, from what I understand. But they're looking at young adults. They're looking at
Yeah.
older people. I'm afraid they're not looking at the youth enough. Would you
Right.
agree?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we're going to do it.
We're going to do it. We've got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Folks, this is going to be a long discussion and a long effort. We've got to get there. Thanks for being on the
Yeah,
show.
thanks for having me on.
watching. Cape Connect will be back with other issues, other organizations that are working for different things on the Cape, and possibilities. Hope to see you again. Thanks.